Wednesday. We did 9. Should we move to 9? Moving now to agenda item number 9 is a necessary council satisfaction survey that's been done. Gets done in the mid-term of every triennium. Mrs. Gilbert is here. Yes, she is.
Actually, Steve Cutting here did the bulk of the work on this, so we might, with your permission, let Mr. Cutting address the item.
Happily given.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good afternoon. The purpose of the report is to provide councillors with the Residents and Ratepayers Survey for 2012. The full copy of the survey has been provided, which includes the methodology. So we won't go into that in detail. In terms of the council, the survey itself is very useful when is used in both LTP and annual report performance reporting. This survey in particular has probably two key benefits, which I'd just like to touch on. The first is the consistency and flexibility. One, it repeats questions from previous surveys, so it gives councillors and the public the ability to see trends over time from survey to survey. And then the flexibility also that we tag on particular questions of interest to councillors and to the staff. And secondly, the same survey is also used by a number of other councils, and so we're able to compare ourselves with peer groups as well as nationally around the country. As I said, a full copy of the survey has been provided. The cover report, which is included in the agenda, just sort of summarises the main changes which have occurred since 2009. Would you like me to just quickly go through that, or are you happy with? Okay. In terms of services and facilities, it's extremely positive. Satisfaction has increased right across the board, aside from the two areas which are down the bottom, to relate to the Mangakino swimming pool and to the district library services. Other positive outcomes from the survey in terms of information and communications as to how and where people in the community find information has increased and is extremely high. A number of other positives include the community spirit level, and that's less positive. Some issues. The question as to whether council is in touch with its communities has fallen by 10% to 64%. It's probably worth noting in the report that the non-resident ratepayers, which are part of the survey, has actually fallen, and it would actually has a dramatic effect on the overall element of that. Other less positive things are from the knowledge of the long-term direction of the council, and it's worth noting that this survey was undertaken before the draft long-term plan was released. Others include in the involvement in public decision-making, involving the public in council decision-making, which has fallen 14%. The view that ratepayers get value from this council has fallen by 12%, and the performance of the mayor and councillors has also fallen, and the performance of staff has just risen just ever so slightly. And just finally, just on the more positive note, as I said, the community spirit level, people who feel that it is either good or very good, is upwards to 78%, which is extremely high. And also, when asked whether they believe that their local town, which referred to their closest town, people were surveyed from across the district, was more attractive than 3 years ago. 1 in 2, or 50%, said it was more attractive, and 35% it was the same. So in the region of around 85% said that it was either the same or better. And with that, Your Worship, I'll open any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Do we have any questions from fellow councillors? These reports have to be done. They're part of the long-term plan process. Okay, well, if there's no questions on it, and this is I'm sorry, Councillor Garnard.
I just asked why it's kind of done halfway through, because you're virtually encapsulating half a past council plus half the current council.
Well, it's a good question, I guess, but bureaucracy is the only answer I've got. Can you help?
Thank you. In fact, the survey is done when it's done, so that it coincides. We get the last count done just before the new LTP runs, and then effectively it works as a set of satisfaction measures through the next LTP as well. So that's kind of the timing of it relates to the long-term plan.
Doesn't sound very good then, does it?
Well, in fact, this was done before the draft long-term plan.
That's what I'm worried about.
Okay, I'm sorry, Councillor Henderson.
Thanks for the report. I understand we have to do this, but I'm looking at this 140-page report, and to be honest, I've got a question what the real use of this is in terms of decision making, and whether it's an effective measure of what the community is actually at. And I just would take one example, being the pool in Turangi. We've all recently heard from submissions. We're currently having a report brought to us about a number of issues with it, but according to this, satisfaction has gone up. Now, that wouldn't be consistent with the feedback I'm getting from the community, so I'm just using that as one isolated example, but I would seriously have to question, I know we have to do this apparently, but 140-page report, I'm not sure it's A, very consistent necessarily with how a lot of people feel, and B, I struggle to see what practical use in terms of implementing what we do a lot of this is. Anyway, that's my view.
And if I could add to Councillor Henderson's, perhaps there are more comments than questions, who paid for it and how much it cost?
Council paid for it, and it cost
It was
25.
around 25 to 28,000.
25 to 28,000 and half a forest. Suggested resolution on page 9 bar 2, unless somebody else.
Just one
Councillor
more
Williams?
comment. As I recall, Ms. Gilbert, we were given a bit of a précis of this satisfaction survey, I think, and some was a few months ago, and it was pointed out that quite a number of the actual surveys are actually happening in June, prior to this, following you getting this report out. We were is that correct?
Sorry, I'm not sure what surveys in June you're referring to.
I'll have to come back to you on that, but I know that it was pointed out that some of these surveys are actually they've been done quite some time ago.
Oh, okay, so when...
Some of the data is quite
All right,
old.
so this is, now I know what you're saying, sorry. When we've been looking at quarterly reports that report against your long-term plan measures each quarter, and that concludes each year with your annual report, there's a whole bunch of the measures in here that are measures that go into that, and certainly in the last lot of quarterly reporting, which was the third quarter report, you made some comments about how these measures seemed pretty out of date. And that's because we only do this report once every 3 years, which is a cost-saving measure. But certainly, in the next set of reporting, obviously we've got the most up-to-date measures.
Okay, if there's no more questions on the 140-page report. Sorry, Councillor Kirk.
Sorry, I just adding to, I can understand that we need to do them, but I'm reading through this, they're done by phone survey, like 4:30 to 8:30 on a weekday. I mean, I can pretty much say that I wouldn't get value from council if someone rang me around dinner time on a weekday asking if I was happy with council. So is there other ways of trying to survey residents and ratepayers in the future rather than phone surveys?
Online, for example. Sorry.
And of course, they do that because that's when people are in.
I don't do surveys, so...
There's a great many ways that we can survey residents and ratepayers. I guess one of the strengths of this particular survey is that this is now the fourth time that it's been conducted, and so we're getting some quite good time series information. I think all surveyors across the Western world are really familiar with the issue you raise about how do you make sure you reach a really good cross-section of your target audience, and who's more likely to be captured and who's less likely to be captured in that survey. And that does have some implications, but those are kind of big methodological issues that they're a wee bit beyond our scope to deal with. We can certainly have online surveys. The issue is just simply what's it comparable with, because any number's great, but more interesting is how does that number change over time.
Ms Gilbert, my issue is this is forced upon us by the Local Government Act 2002. We have to do this.
Not strictly, Your Worship. We
So it's $30,000, and I've got councillors and plus internal costs, I'm sure, yourself included, National Research Bureau. And, you know, I've got comments on to have 140 pages, and I'm sort of hearing that councillors don't think it's right. So is it a government legislated thing we have to do or not?
No, we're required in our long-term plan to have a performance framework and to have some measures and ways of assessing how well are we delivering the services that we deliver and to report against those.
We have to do it.
This is one dimension of that.
What other dimensions? So how much has it cost us to fulfil what you just said? This is only part of it you're now telling me?
Yes, so other measures we have are things like at the swimming pools is, you know, how many people came, and we don't just ask, did you like it? Or we might look at water things. We might look at, well, what was the quality of the water or the water pressure, or, you know, how many people had access to a service. So those kinds of details are in the performance measures part of the long-term plan that we'll be addressing later. So satisfaction is only one dimension of the measures. It's not compulsory, but the guidelines that come to us when we look at what comes through from the Office of the Auditor General around performance frameworks do make the point that satisfaction or perception surveys are one useful dimension, but they are not the whole story, and they are not legislatively required.
Councillor Downard?
Oh, no, well, I suppose Helen's just answered it, because this only comes out every 3 years, and it's because of the long-term plan, isn't it? So you'll be starting the next one now and seeing the effects of the long-term plan over the next 3 years. Is that correct? Getting those results out of that?
We will be reporting on these results as soon as we do the annual report. The results will be repeated over the next 2 years, and then you will do a new one. So basically, you've got to divide your 25,000 by 3.
Okay, Councillor.
Well, quite frankly, I can't see the point in getting this $30,000 survey after we've gone through the long-term planning process and are unable to react to anything. We could do it in the annual plan, but I would like to suggest that we actually have a 1-hour workshop and look at other ways to perhaps look at a satisfaction survey. Because I mean, for me, looking at this data here, and as Councillor Henderson says, I mean, during just in the submission process, I can see quite a few anomalies as to what's come out in this, and as what we sort of, with some quite objective feedback from the long-term planning submissions, have absorbed. So I'd like to look at reviewing this whole process, because it's $30,000, and if we can't use it as a tool to make decisions on, then I had to question the purpose of it.
I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree with what Councillor Williams has said. If there's no outcomes of this, if there's no follow-up, where does it go? Straight in the bin, because we haven't got any.
Point taken, and we are doing a mid-term review amongst ourselves in the very near future. So if we could have this as an agenda item to that workshop.
Certainly, and I will actually also make the point that the timing of this was changed with the previous council to bring it into this particular slot. We would be happy to change it back to the mid-term slot that we had previously.
Okay, Councillor Henderson.
So, sorry, Mr. Chairman, what was the reasoning for that? Can you remember?
It was very much around just that it was timing associated with the long-term plan. It was as I recall it, so it was felt to be more useful at that time. But we're happy to change it back.
Councillor Henderson.
Yeah, just to endorse what the other councillors are saying and sort of summarise what I was saying at the start, is that really this information is as useful as it is for making decisions, and therefore if we don't have it at a time when we're making decisions, how can we make it useful for informing those decisions? So the timing, which Councillor Williams mentioned, is really important, in that we've just made a lot of decisions where a lot of this information would have been quite useful. So.
Yeah. And Councillor Minshew?
It's just to say, like, Canada comment was the same. I think it's valuable information, but the timing. I just think, there's a good cross-section
of that. It gets added to this mid-term review as to when we do this workshop, mid-term review workshop?
It's a valuable information.
So that being
Could I just say that we're getting surveys and information all of the time, and the key is that we take that information on board and we do build it into our decision making. It's not a case of receiving information and putting it in the cupboard. So this information will be an integral part of any decision making going forward, as will any of the other surveys that come out, such as our economic development surveys that we're regularly updated on. So we need to make sure that we capture this information and use it wisely going forward. Had it been 12 months ago, there would be another survey coming out now that we would say is too late for this LTP. But the fact of the matter is we always receive information, we always receive surveys and other data that we always need to build into our plans going forward.
So there's a suggestion... Oh, sorry, Councillor Henson?
One quick thing, I'd just like to respond to Mr Williams about that. I understand we receive information all the time, but we're talking about a $25,000 to $28,000 report here that's done once every 3 years and 140 pages. So I think it's critical that this does feed into our long-term decision-making and planning. Yes, we receive information all the time, but I'd say in terms of cost and volume, this is one of the most significant, if not the most significant, in terms of ratepayer satisfaction.
Councillor Kirk?
Oh, just maybe a stupid question, I don't know, but is this what was referred to as the Mako?
No, that's a much lesser survey that has even greater unreliability. It surveys 70 people across the whole district. It's actually constructed for the Waikato region, and we just buy a small share of it, and its results are very dubious for this district.
What does Mako stand for?
Monitoring and reporting on community outcomes.
Right, thanks.
Okay, no further questions. There is a suggested resolution on page 9/2 that District Council Residents and Ratepayer Satisfaction Survey 2012 be received. Do I have a mover, please? Move, Councillor Minsher. Seconder, Councillor Kepper. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Moving now to